Hello, everybody. It's Friday. That means it's time for another topic of the week. First things first, last week's topic on convention memories. Lots of good stories shared in the comments. Check it out. As always, that video will be referenced down below. So, quick preamble because we're moving right on. This week's topic. Well, I was having a conversation with Tom earlier, and my co-host from Warhammer Weekly, and I was talking about. He said he found it funny as we sit here as I'm recording this. It's sort of, right before the Karaduran overlords or whatever are gonna probably go on pre-order and whatnot. And so we were talking about the Eminent Dwarf release, and isn't it odd or ironic or whatever that there's sort of the nature of what the releases were within Age of Sigmar, that there have been two dwarf releases, two orc releases, sort of, and yet there's been no elves, or like what's there and what's missing. And my general feeling was twofold. I said I don't think it's that unusual. One, because as we know and has been discussed, the release schedule is largely driven by a sort of rule of cool of what the sculptors and artists create. So, with that in mind, there's always going to be some weird kind of, I don't know what you want to say, like, it's going to be some oddity to it. It's not like they sat out and formed a grid and said this, this, this. Now, I know they move things around sometimes and so on and so forth. They're not exactly a slave to that or anything, but that tends to dictate largely what gets created in the broad terms. But I didn't think it was that weird because as I reflected on this, and as we're coming up, this is, it's now springtime, and we're coming up to what will eventually be here in a little while, in a couple months. We're about a quarter away from the 2-year anniversary of Age of Sigmar. And when I look at the number of releases and I really think back upon it, it's shocking to me. When I put it in terms of past edition changes and things like that, even where there's been very large changes. Now, some of these releases are certainly smaller than what you might have seen in the old world, in the earlier editions. But I think back to changes in between 4th and 5th, or 5th and 6th, 7th, 8th, and so on and so forth. And 2 years in, there are releases where I went back and looked, and there were periods in those various editions where you had maybe 4 army books in those 2 years, maybe 5, and they were pretty, and they didn't necessarily contain new figs. Maybe you got 1 or 2 new units, but that's more or less they relied on a lot of the traditional stuff. It wasn't. It was only every so often that there was sort of a total reset, and that was rare. And so I thought about that, and I thought about the nature of the releases so far, and so that led me to this week's topic, which is, what do you think of the releases so far? Not what you want to see in the future, but anything like that. Because we've talked about that before, and I think there's all lots of things we'd like to see. But what do you think of the releases so far within the first year, 9 months or so of Age of Sigmar? Do you like the armies that have come out? Do you like the new style of the books that are being released now? Especially these newer tomes with more flashy bits in them to customize and stuff like that. Do you feel like they're hitting the right, the right cadence of releases? Too fast, too slow? I think that's all interesting stuff because for me, even though there have been some that I've jumped on board with. Obviously, I went whole hog on Sylvaneth. I loved all of that. I bought a bunch of the Tzeentch stuff. I loved all that. So there have been, for me, it's been nice because I can't think of any other period in the history of the game in 20 years, and this year's my 20th anniversary. I can't think of any other time in 20 years that I was that tempted by so many things in such a short period of time. So to me, that's really, I think, a sign of strength. And of course, I am looking forward to the future and what's sort of coming out. But that being said, for me, I feel like it's been a good release schedule, though I do wish there were a couple other things touched. I think that there have been some notable absences to get this far in and not have touched them. Especially for me, I think my co-host Tom would clearly say elves. That's his big pain point, obviously, and I know he's got plenty of allies out there. For me, honestly, it's sort of non-Stormcast humans. I'd love just a tome. Tyler Mingle had made a passing comment about doing a Defenders of Azir book. Oh man, I'd love that. Just like sort of like an all the peoples, kind of the old legacy armies that stayed in Azir and remained, I don't know, true to their history. I think that'd be great. That's the only thing that's missing for me when I look back at all of this, because I'm happy to let the armies sort of roll out as they are, but they've been coming at such a clip that I found there's always something I'm at least interested in, or that I think is interesting, or then of course at the best that I go out and buy. So there you go. That's this week's topic. What do you think of the releases so far? Do you like the speed with which they're coming out? And do you like sort of the new way that things are rolling now as we enter into this new year with the new style of Battle Tome and kind of the way that they've been approaching these armies? Do you like that sometimes we get, more or less a repackaged forces, maybe one new unit, sometimes we get a whole new army? Do you like that mix? Do you feel that's about right? So I look forward to your responses. As always, comment down below. Let me know what you feel about it, or make a video response. And if you do, I'll link that down there too. All right? Thank you very much, everybody. Look forward to the discussion, and we'll see you next time.